Good afternoon. My name's Andy, as you can see, and I head up the marketing science team at ANZ for Facebook. Events like today are awesome, and it's good to be a part of it, and I think they're a great opportunity for us to share and learn. I don't think we probably do enough of that as an industry, and I certainly see the role of the IB as probably being never more important than it is at the moment, as they help us navigate things like the changes in the internet and privacy. And then also how they actually help us understand, and the industry understand, the value that's created by the ads that are run. Which is a good segue into what I'm going to talk about today, and that is lifetime value. So how we're seeing the shift from more volume-based metrics to value-based metrics. So I'm going to go through a few slides. I'll keep it quite quick. I am going to do some maths on screen, so that'll keep you awake. And then the good stuff's going to come from the Iconic, who have really kind of done a lot of good work in this space, and they very kindly agreed that they can share some of their learnings on it as well. So how important is lifetime value? So this is just taken from the Mary Meeker 2018 Trends Report. And what you can see is actually it's pretty damn important. So 27% of people said it was an important metric to be optimizing ad spend against. So it's a large proportion of the people saying it's important to them. Interestingly, that's 3 times over that of multi-touch attribution, right down there at the 8%, which was quite a big surprise to me. So people are really understanding like how they, as I said, make that shift to value-based metrics instead of just looking at some snapshots of time. And we're certainly seeing that at Facebook. So we work a lot with gaming advertisers and also apps and all manner of companies, retail, e-commerce, et cetera, and we're really seeing the shift from proxies or volume metrics, from clicks, installs, really through to now actual lifetime value. And I think that's been said quite a few times this morning, that advertising should be held accountable against the business outcome it's looking to drive. And we're certainly seeing that the leading companies are doing a bit more than just calculating it. They're actually embedding this within their teams and their structures and how they resource their marketing efforts as well. And just another bit of research from, I think this was from Bain. It just looks at the top sort of 500 advertisers, and it found that the top tier of those advertisers were 3.5 times more likely to actually embed their employees across the full customer lifecycle, and they were 1.9 times more likely to scrutinise lifetime value alongside other metrics that they're using as well. So it is a big deal, it is important, and companies that do it and do it well are sort of gaining the benefits from it. It also has a broader application. I've just realised the screen's over there, now I can look over there. And most people think of this as probably an acquisition tool, and it is very important in that regard as well. But actually, when you're trying to figure out which advertising platforms you want to buy that reach on, you want to be focusing your attention on platforms where you can find these higher value people, or you can create this high value. It's also really good for assessing broader ROI strategies as well. So your fuller marketing, sort of broader digital marketing mix as such. So moving away from that campaign short-term metrics to actually understanding, did we increase the lifetime value and did we increase the actual amount of revenue made by the company, and thinking about an ROI from that point of view. Similarly, it's a really good way of assessing the impact of your management strategy. So if you're trying to remove friction, you're trying to improve customer service, an increase in an LTV is a very good metric to quantify your efforts there. And then more sort of, probably a bit more familiar to most people, is a bit more around where should you be applying your retention efforts. You're not going to apply them everywhere, but are there any inflection points you really want to be going after that do massively impact that lifetime value? What it does mean, though, is we need to move away a bit from some of the more ingrained KPIs. So I've taken this outrageously simplified chart here, which is, I don't know if you can read it now, which is a bit of a concern. So in the blue, we've got a cost per purchase, and in the red, we've got a average purchase value. And just trying to think, what campaign would you reinvest in based on this? And, first of all, your eyes jump to campaign number 3. It's got a higher average purchase value, and a relatively lower cost per purchase. But these variables probably aren't enough for you to actually make that decision. You certainly wouldn't be going anywhere near campaign 5 with its high cost per and low average value. But lo and behold, if you introduce a metric like lifetime value, it could give you a completely different story. This isn't based on any data, but I'm just trying to visualize it for you here. So lifetime value, for instance, what you figure out is that the customers you acquired in campaign 5, yes, there were less of them, hence the higher CPA. Yes, they had a lower average purchase value, but they actually bought lots of times over a really long time. So they were a lot more valuable to you as a business. And that's what we're trying to get to here. We're trying to understand, where would you put your marketing efforts if you knew that kind of information? And so I thought I'd continue on the examples here, and so I thought I'd take Australia's favourite coffee brand, and I just thought I'd, which is also a good thing because they share lots of information on the internet, and so I thought I'd just bring it to life with a bit of an example. And what's quite cool about this is actually there's no shortage of information about how to calculate LTV for specific businesses or different types of businesses. So, do have a look on the internet. You'll find very good equations and principles that you can use. Just people are sharing them, so it's a good place to start. So I'll just continue with Starbucks though, and someone walks in after seeing some advertising, they spend $6.50 on a frappuccino, and then they've got a target CPA of $300. Things are looking pretty bad. Fair to say that what should their CPA be? Shouldn't be that, but what is the actual lifetime value of that customer? I told you we're going to do maths on screen. So a typical LTV equation might be something along the lines of the number of weeks in the year, the average revenue you receive in that week, and then the tenure as a company. And would you believe that Starbucks has a tenure of 20 years in America? So you can see there that $24.30 is probably about 4 times the visits based on that $6 mark. And you can see there's a very large amount of money that is the potential revenue you could have, I guess, from a customer from that point when they started buying coffee. But that probably feels a bit greedy. People aren't always going to go to Starbucks. They may actually get some sense and not continue buying there and buy nicer coffee. So you probably need to factor in a few other variables that into this equation as well. We won't go too deeply into these, but lifespan we covered. Retention rates, so how likely are they to continue buying? What is the churn rate? In this case, it's 75% retention rate. Things like the rate of discount, trying to understand the future value of your cash flow in this as well needs to be taken into account. And of course, the margin comes into it here. So the margin in this case is 21.3%. We apply that to the 25,000 and you get the bottom 5,300, which you'll see why I'm babbling on like this in a moment. This will be another version of that LTV equation where we're pulling in a few more variables here. So we have got gross margin, we have got retention, we've got discount. And you can actually see that the number's wildly different to the previous number, okay, by factoring in more of these things. So I don't know what the actual LTV of a customer is for Starbucks, but you can certainly see that, the 25,000 is a bit on the greedy side. But if you knew it was 11,000, you'd be assessing your marketing efforts in a very different way than just looking at a flat CPA that you were trying to achieve. So what's cool about it when you've got it is you can actually really start to think about where you apply your efforts. And so this is some data we've published relatively recently across ride-sharing apps. What you can see here is the heavy usage cohort of people actually accounts for 75% of the entire usage for these ride-sharing apps. That's a massive. It's almost 80-20 on this kind of thing. But if you knew that, you would very much be looking after that 32% of people, trying to make sure that they didn't drop out. How could you maybe even increase their usage? You'd also be thinking to yourself, how do I find more people like the 32%? That's certainly relevant, I know, in industries like wagering and gaming as well. And hopefully, as you get a feel for what I'm talking about here, like you can see where LTV can actually be used through the entire customer journey or life cycle, whatever you want. So from that acquisition point of view, how do I find more people with high predicted LTV? When you onboard people, how do I make sure that I can remove as much friction as possible so they can actually grow, like change that retention curve shape so the LTV increases? And then you move a bit more sort of into the traditional CRM space with like engage and upsell. But how do you do that without over-targeting and micro-targeting? And how do you do that at scale with some of the questions that the Iconic maybe might tell us about? But what I'm not trying to advocate here against reach principles and Ehrenberg Bass and all that kind of stuff. But there's clearly, a use case here for understanding who your high value customers are and trying to either find more people like them or grow them as well. So where does Facebook typically work with advertisers in this space? Well, first of all, you've got to actually measure the LTV. So you've got to be able to understand what information is available to you. How can you actually build in what the value of someone is and then actually forecast it and generate it over time? Once you've got that information, what we can do is actually start thinking about varying the bidding strategies. So if you know that someone has a high predicted lifetime value or is a high lifetime value customer, you might want to bid more in our auction to make sure that you win more auctions and show more ads to those people so you can influence their behavior. And conversely as well, you might think about how you then lower your bidding for those that with a lower predicted lifetime value, and that blended result then should be a little bit more profitable. And then also we through our ads platform, you can amplify those strategies you've got on that life cycle journey there. So thinking about how you try and reach people at certain touch points to influence that LTV. But probably the main way that we help or support advertisers in this space is through a measurement methodology that actually enables growth, and that is incrementality. So that's a lot of the work that myself and my team do here, is really trying to understand what the impact is of the ads versus what would have happened anyway. So if you take this, again, rather simplified kind of retention-shaped curve here, what we're trying to figure out is if the role of ads here is at this point where people would have churned, that's the curve, and we're able to influence that and change it. We only want to take credit for what's in the shaded area there. So the incremental value created by the ads. And it actually fits very nicely alongside lifetime value-based metrics. You're trying to grow the value of someone. So you want to be able to say, what was it previously and how much have I grown it by the use of my marketing efforts. So incrementality is a big deal there. But Gay said it earlier, and it's been around for a long time. People have talked about it for a long time, but not that many people have really kind of adopted it throughout their business, and that's because it's not really an easy shift. It's hard to predict the future lifetime value. I made a lot of assumptions there just on that Starbucks one, getting to that 11,000 number. It's particularly hard to predict as well when you don't have a lot of data, so that just gets a little bit more challenging. There are companies and organizations where KPIs are so ingrained that you just can't change them. CPAs are what procurement has guaranteed, or CPMs or something like that, so it's very hard to change them. You do need buy-in from multiple stakeholders as well, and we're going to touch on that with the Iconic and how they've done it. So this isn't just the measurement team, this isn't the analytics team, this is the marketing team, potentially even the finance team as well. And it does require that slightly different sort of lens on your measurement as well. So incremental measurement is probably the only way you should really be measuring your lifetime value on these efforts.